So I started dancing only about 5 years ago, so it's certainly not something that I've been doing all my life, but it was something that I'd wanted to do for quite a while before I actually got around to learning. And eventually I managed to pluck up the courage to go along to a beginner's dance class in Edinburgh where I was living at the time. And it all just kind of snowballed on from there. But in my experience, this really hasn't been the sort of authentic oral tradition that people often think about when they picture people engaging in folklore. But for me, something just clicked inside me really as soon as I started step dancing, and it's gone on to become a huge part of my life and really a huge part of who I am. Well, the interesting thing about Scottish step dancing is really that, and there's a lot of debate about this, but for the most part it had died out effectively in Scotland sometime around, sometime after the clearances, so around the 19th, certainly by the early 20th century, I would say that to all intents and purposes step dancing was not something that was really done in Scotland anymore, and so it's been seen as something that was kept alive in Cape Breton, right? It wasn't until around about 20 or 30 years ago that Cape Bretoners actually were invited across to Scotland and kind of taught us our stepping again, right? Which is a completely oversimplified version of events. You know, there's people arguing now that step dancing never really died out in Scotland at all, that there was always little pockets of people doing it or who remembered their grandparents, parents and grandparents doing it, and it's just that no one's really made the effort to go out and collect that stuff, and I think that's being addressed a little bit now, but and also then to what extent is what was reintroduced from Cape Breton, to what extent does that represent what we lost, as it were, in Scotland, and or you know, there's people who argue that there's no such thing as Scottish step dance as it stands now because we should just call it Cape Breton step. You need to have that little bit of background there, but the fact that we do have that clean slate, I think, gives us a huge amount of scope and a huge amount of freedom to be innovative, because we don't have that kind of weight of tradition behind it that you often feel like is kind of dragging you back if you're a participant in various more venerable traditions, if you like. You know, I was just saying that a lot of the steps don't have proper names for them either. So oftentimes they'll be named after the person who made up that step or whatever, but quite often they don't have names, so we have kind of made up names for the things, like the elephant step, because it sounds like a herd of elephants. One of my favourites is the monkey step, because the rhythm at the start sounds like monkey monkey. It sort of goes monkey monkey like that. So that's the monkey step, and that's a Donald Brown step. There's one move that I refer to as the dog poo, because it looks like you're scraping dog poo off the heel of your shoe. So you're sort of scraping with your heel and then coming down with your toe. So I call that the dog poo. Well, lots of in our group we all call it the dog poo. So the two dancers that have really been probably most influential for me, both in terms of just learning the dance form and the basics of it, but also then in terms of starting to push the boundaries a bit and actually starting to experiment with rhythms, have been two Scottish dancers. First of all, Frank McConnell, and then also another Scottish dancer called John Sikorsky. And definitely Frank, certainly in a lot of the steps that he's composed, has been involved in kind of experimenting with rhythm to some extent, and for sure John does that in the steps that he's composed a lot. He really loves to mess around with rhythm, and those sort of experiments, if you like, that he's done rhythmically have had a huge influence on the steps that I have recently started to compose. People like me are just kind of second generation. It's that young, you know, and so even with people like Frank, you can see that kind of innovative stuff coming in, and whether that's stuff that he's seen. I mean, he's been to Cape Breton a lot of times to study with dancers over there and you know, videotape them and take ideas back. But I also think that he has himself been fairly innovative rhythmically. And it's like I was saying, steps that I've been totally inspired by have tended to be the ones that push the boundaries and do kind of cut across the music and use and are quite innovative with rhythm and stuff. And those have been the same steps that have completely turned a lot of people that I dance with off, because they like stuff that fits together with the music, and they love that feeling of you know, just mirroring the shape of tunes and stuff. Put stuff from jigs into reels, so rather than actually superimposing the jig rhythm and doing the 3 against 4, actually putting the jig step like that John Sikorsky step, where it goes steps, where it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, then to put that into reels. But yeah, obviously, as soon as any tradition sort of takes root, there's going to be certain rules that come in, and there's going to be some people that have more authority to determine what can be done and what can't be done. I remember, and Ian will know if this is true or not, but the leader of my group that I danced with back home, she always said that you could never, ever, ever dance Strathspey steps to marches, and this would be considered in Cape Breton, which is the kind of mecca of authenticity for this kind of revived Scottish step dance tradition or whatever, which is great in a lot of ways. But you know, I think there's stuff that gets said about Cape Breton that's like, well, has anyone really kind of investigated this, and is this really true? But maybe it is true, but if you did that in Cape Breton, it'd be a terrible social faux pas and you'd be thrown out of the hall or whatever, right? So, and people would get into trouble, like, because members of the group would bring in like pieces of music on CD and sort of say, I thought we could maybe make up some kind of Strathspey routine to this, and they'd be like, no, that's a march, we can't do that, we cannot do that. So I think that I almost use step dance as a medium for some other agenda that I have, which is that whole playing with rhythm thing, and it's a perfect medium for it. But a lot of people who are learning step dance and doing step dance in Scotland, presumably in other places as well, they're not using it for with that kind of agenda in mind. Too much when like another thing, that fives thing, where you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's like, well, what happens if we take the pause out after the 5? I don't know why I think about these things, but anyway, so just take the pause out after the 5, so you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At home, I had all these opportunities of dancing with other people, that sort of, it was a passion for them as well, and those, I had a lot of friendships there as well, just through dancing, and so obviously that's a huge loss coming here. But at the same time, the folklore department at Mon is the best, right? Really, so one of the best in the world. So and I really wanted my PhD from here, so I had to make that choice. And so I think I've had to obviously make a lot more of my own opportunities for dancing, and I've had to get out there and sort of stick my neck out a little bit. Like if I want to dance to live music, I'll have to sort of run the gauntlet of the sessions. I've probably composed more steps since I've been here because I've been more working on my own a lot. But yeah, I miss my friends. So that's hard, but it's just choices that you make, life decisions, right?
What's his name? Here, let me pause it for a second. Oh man, we're having a technical
This is totally my fault. Actually, I blame you because you stopped wrapping this thing around.
We lost everything.
No.
Okay, well if we...
No, there's gotta be a way to get that thing
No,
off
this-
without. Here,
oh.
wait, is it this thing? No.
No, that's all one piece, see?
Here, maybe we can
Oh
unscrew
wait,
from the
this
bottom.
thing.
Yeah, that's what that looks like. I mean, there you go. No?
Now this should slip. There we go.
Ah.
That's it. So it's...
You know, we can have some coffee now. But